Hey, 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 I'm the Chief. My buddy Mark is here with me, and we have got a special guest in the house. All right, stop. Whatever you're doing, TJ's back, the airwaves we're chewing, rocking a G.I. Joe podcast, interview special, questions will be asked. Will it ever stop? Yo, I don't think so, not as long as someone's publishing Joe. Artists, writers, G.I. Joe fanboys, let's get this thing started and hope we don't annoy our guest in the studio right now. They've come in for a chat discussing when, where and how, probing. We're going in deep. Anything less, we might as well be asleep. Questioning them about the G.I. Joe history. Unwrapping answers like a whodunit mystery. TJ interview. TJ interview. TJ interview. Right, I'm going to give a quick introduction because when you pick up these funny books off the stand and you see these headliners, these writers, these artists, okay, they may be drawing the pictures, the lovely pictures, and writing the dialogue for all these favourite characters. There's a couple of key people behind the scenes that I think go unnoticed sometimes, and that is the letterer, and in our case, the colorist. And we have got one of the best in the biz, the man who has colored more issues of G.I. Joe in human history than anyone else. And I think, I could be wrong here, but I think he has been credited on more issues of G.I. Joe than anyone, with the exception of Mr. Hama, and that is the wonderful Mr. J. Brown. James Brown, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to get someone of your ilk onto the show. So it's late at night for us. It's in the afternoon for you. I'll quickly go over to my co-host, Mark. How are you, sir?
Good, yeah. Good to be talking.
Yeah,
and to such a distinguished guest with such a long legacy on the Joe books.
Yeah, we're going to get into the Joe stuff, obviously, but let's just start at the beginning. When you were Mr. Little J. Brown, were comics a part of your youth and your childhood growing up?
Oh, absolutely. I was raised to read on comics. My father was a comic book lover, and this was in the late '60s and early '70s, and I can remember copies of Conan #1 laying around, and I think one of the first comics I ever got was my dad would go into this convenience store or corner store, and back in those days, comics would be on the newsstand. And when they didn't sell all of them, they'd rip the covers off, and then they'd sell them at a discount. And I remember getting copies of X-Men and Spider-Man with the covers off, dropped off on my bedside from my dad.
Yeah, we hear lots of stories of comic pros who learned to read via the comic medium. That seems to be a common thread running through a lot of creators, actually.
I think I was one of the only grade schoolers who understand what a mutant was and how to spell it.
Yeah, good. And then at what point did you kind of think, well, this funny book business, there's a living to be made here. Maybe a boy can make some money here. Yeah,
I don't know how many people actually go into it thinking that there's a big money to be made. But no, I was years later, and in my professional world, I was in the graphic design business. I worked in book publishing, but always had a love for comics. So I looked around at my skills and realized that I couldn't draw worth a damn, and inking was a bit beyond me. But I saw an opening, and perhaps with doing coloring. So I was able to get my hands on black and white comics. And this was in the days, I think in the late 80s, early 90s, where Dark Horse Presents was a big comic book. And they published in black and white. And this was Frank Miller's first Sin City work. And I remember grabbing those books and Xeroxing them onto watercolor paper. In the early days of coloring was done with markers and paints and dyes on watercolor paper itself, on paper. And then it was handed off to the printer to lay in the colors. So I remember getting my hands on this black and white artwork and working up samples on Frank Miller's Sin City and other Dark Horse Presents, I think it was Aliens versus Predator, and doing samples and put together a portfolio. I'm in the Boston area in USA, and back in those days, they would have comic book conventions at Madison Square Garden in New York City, and those were the big shows. And I would get on the train and get to the show as early as I can, and I just started showing my portfolio to different editors for different comic book companies, and got my first work with I believe it was Dark Horse and Harris Comics, Vampirella publisher. Just did some legwork and put together a portfolio and start showing it to the editors who can actually give me work potentially.
Wow,
Yeah,
just doing the work, getting it in their hands, and being given a chance, I guess. Different
now, isn't it? I mean, I think a lot of people get spotted from social media, don't they, where they're posting up images on Instagram and Twitter, and then the companies are actually out there looking for this talent, whereas back in the day you could pitch your work at conventions, like you say. So
it's a different world now, and it's much you don't have the expense. I mean, I would have to go and make up copies. And not only did I go to conventions in person, I would mail out sample packages. I would print these copies up and put together a package and put them in the mail and send them to editors and get my my nice form rejection letters. But these days, no, these days with social media and the web, you could post your own comic. Just post a whole comic book to show potential editors and comic book companies what you can do, and you could do more than just a single page here and there. You could actually produce a whole book. It's an amazing opportunity for talent to be seen.
Excellent. Do you remember what your first published book was?
I believe it was a reprint. It was a recoloring of a book called Herbie, which was
in Dark Horse.
the Fat Fury, and they were recoloring these Herbie books, and that was one of the first assignments I got, was recoloring Herbie from the originals, and then I think I did a Starship Troopers movie adaptation for Dark Horse as well. So those were a couple of the first works I did, as well as Harris Comics. They were the Vampirella publisher. They were also the first publisher of Cyberfrog, as well as some other lesser-known properties. But I did some work for Harris Comics as well back in the early days.
Yeah, I was looking through some of the books you've worked on, and I saw the cover to I don't know how this is pronounced, but the Demon by Dark Horse.
That's right.
I remember that one. I think I might have bought it, but yeah, I definitely remember seeing it being advertised in previews, if nothing else.
That does go back a ways, yeah.
And also Milestone as well, is that correct?
Oh boy, that was when things really took off. That was 92, 93. I was very fortunate and knew a few people. Not even sure if I remember the exact connections, but I was fortunate to be part of a groundbreaking company, Milestone Media, run by Dwayne McDuffie and Dennis Cowan, and worked on some of their high-profile books. Icon, I did a little bit of Static, I did Blood Syndicate, Hardware. I participated in all of them, and those were comic books that were hand-painted from the line work of the artists, and then those hand-painted color guides, color boards, were then actually reprinted. They took pictures of the color boards and then made color files out of those, and as well as Jim Shooter's big second company after Valiant was Defiant, and I worked on their flagship title called Warriors of Plasm.
Yeah, I
remember that as well.
I love that book. David Lapham in his early days, the detail was incredible, groundbreaking idea. They still have replicated that idea of a world, but those are the beginning days.
Yeah, exciting
Excellent.
stuff. Very vibrant. Those Warriors of Plasm books were so vibrant, is my recollection of them.
Definitely. And I guess when you were still painting on a watercolor board, that must have been quite a nice kind of almost like artifact collector's item in its own right. That must have just in person looked like a lovely piece of art with the watercolors. It was
different. It was different than I mean, it was, first of all, it was just a pleasure to be able to work on such great artwork. But you were literally working with brush strokes and laying it down with every brushstroke had to mean something, and I mean sometimes it was harder to do that way because the artwork was so detailed. And with computers now, there's a little bit more ability to isolate what you want to work on. But yeah, I still have some of those original color boards.
No. How was, just, I'm going to jump forward a little bit. How was, you mentioned it there, but how was the shift going from physical coloring to digital coloring for you personally? Was that an easy transition to make, or something that you had to work on?
I had to work on it. I mean, there was no formal training. I didn't have any formal art school training, and computer design, computer painting, I think was in its infancy back in the early 90s. It was starting to be accepted more in comics. But no, I'm entirely self-taught, and there was no real choice. The industry went there. The industry embraced the technology. It became cheaper and faster to produce books using computer coloring. Image Comics pioneered a lot of the great computer coloring that you saw back then. But I had to teach myself how to use the computer. And I mean, back then, I mean, I had to paint on a page using a mouse, looking at a screen. So imagine trying to paint with a brick, basically. It took some doing. And then technology developed where you could have a tablet, a drawing tablet on screen, and now you can replicate the feel of a brush in your hand, and nothing beats that. But yeah, there was a steep learning curve. Let's put it that way.
Would you go back at all, or not? Is this definitely a obviously it's a cost saving in doing it digitally, but is there anything you can do physically that you can't do digitally, or not really?
I don't think so. With the types of brushes and palettes and tools that are available in a program like Photoshop, which I believe is the industry standard for computer coloring in comics, you can get brushes that look absolutely natural and look grungy and rough, and you could do that if you put in the effort to either create the brushes or find the brushes. But there is something very satisfied of seeing how a dye soaks into paper, and seeing how it just reacts, and how mixing colors differently will create something maybe even unexpected. I mean, with a computer coloring, the undo key can just change everything in a moment's notice. If you don't like how two colors mix together, go back a couple of steps and undo. But with a hand-painted board, if you don't want to start the whole page over again, you learn to live with the happy accident back then. But
well, you've got to find yourself to create something new.
Yeah, but there is also a downside to that, because artists who work digitally, they don't have a physical item that is a collectible or that is one of a kind that can be resold. I have my color boards from those books, from those milestone books, from those Defiant books. Those have a intrinsic value because they are literally one of a kind, and they can be sold for whoever might find them valuable. Same with, I mean, the incredible market in artist pencils and original pencils and inks boards. They're incredibly valuable, depending on the book, can be incredibly valuable collector's items because they're really one of a kind.
Yeah, most definitely. How did you? Let's kind of segue into your work on Joe here. How did you get that gig on the Joe books?
At the time, the editor on the G.I. Joe titles was a man named Andy Schmidt, and I had done some work for him back in my Marvel days. And he moved from Marvel to IDW Publishing, and before IDW had the Joe license, they were doing Transformers books and they were doing Star Trek books. And I worked on, he called me in and said, need help, need somebody I can rely on to get these books done. And I started by playing in the Star Trek sandbox a little bit, and then doing some Transformers book. Transformers was my regular book for a period of time. I'm not sure how many issues I actually worked on. But, and then G.I. Joe came along. I think I did a little bit of work on the Rise of Cobra, some of the movie adaptations books, or they started to do one-shot books for G.I. Joe. and I worked on those.
I think there was one called Operation Hiss that you worked on, which was in
Right.
that
the
universe.
movie tie-in, which was great art. And we did a great job of connecting to the movie. But then Larry Hama came back for A Real American Hero. They decided to launch the restart of that 1980s storyline, which had ended with issue number 155. They did an issue 155.5, and they were releasing it as a new comic day book. The artist was Augustin Padilla, I believe.
That's right.
And Andy had me come in to take over that series. And I've been, one way or another, I've been coloring issues of that book since that issue. I have to ask a question. That is news to me, what you said, something that I had colored or worked on more issues of Joe than anybody else. Have you checked that out? Because I don't know that number to be true.
That's what Mark told me.
That make me sound great, or is
that's what Mark told me before the show, so I'm relying on him.
Really?
He's a research man.
Okay. I've never checked that out.
Yeah,
I'd be amazed
I'll need to reach out to our fan base to make sure that I'm not getting it wrong there. But I think
let's put an asterisk on that.
I wouldn't be surprised though. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly.
Because I think other than that, it's probably Shannon Gallant, and you'll have done more issues than him, because you've been on virtually every single one of the relaunch issues. So
right, I was there on the series before he started, and I was there after he started. But he did a boatload of issues. Amazing talent. What a great artist.
Yes.
You had in your runs on Origins, Special Missions, the other IDW GI Joes as well. That it's adding up to some quite a considerable count. So
see, now you're naming those titles. I have to check to see whether I have forgotten or whether I've blocked them out. I'm not sure.
Well, I guess
I think it'll be interesting to see what the other counts would be actually. But I'd be willing to lay down a bet that it's got to be you.
And I guess
that would be something. I mean, it's been 11 years. I haven't colored every issue in 11 years, but I know that I looked back and I saw the first cover I did for issue 155.5, and the file date on that was December 2009. So I do know that goes back 11 years.
There you go. And I guess the natural question after that is, were you a Joe fan prior to getting the gig on the books? And if not, how much research did you have to do prior to starting the job? Well,
the answer to that is I was a Joe fan, but it's which Joe are we talking about? Because my original G.I. Joes were the 12-inch G.I. Joes with the fuzzy hair and beard, and sometimes with a kung fu grip.
The eagle eyes,
so This was the original, the original toy. With I had. Oh, my parents always gave me great Christmases. I had the vehicles, I had the ATV, I had the spaceship, I had the Indiana Jones style, raiding the tomb figures. So those were my original G.I. Joes, which I, treasure. I played with Captain Action figures as well and mixed them up. But I was a bit older. I think I was in my 20s when the new line of G.I. Joes came out. The 3.5-inch figures? Or,
3 3/4. Yeah,
3.
So that was a bit past my youthful days, but I appreciated them. But the other part of the question is, there's always research required when you're working on the sheer number of I individualized characters that you have to look up to see what the original toy version looked like, what the 25th anniversary version might have looked like. So I'm always looking at internet reference to make sure I'm getting the costume or the uniform right of whatever Joe I'm coloring.
So does Larry reach out to you at all? Because he's kind of famous for, being a stickler for particular guns looking the way they do, or reaching out to artists for redraws of certain scenes or certain sections. Would he give you any indication for colors, or would he just leave you to do your thing?
No, he's not reached out to me. I mean, he makes a point, from what I've seen, of making sure the artist is properly prepared with all of the reference that they might need. And yes, he's definitely a stickler and helps the artist to know what type of, whether it's an M60 machine gun or what a fragmentation grenade looks like, or what a armored personnel carrier looks like. He will send that to the artist, but he's never made an issue or made a point of saying, it should be colored like this. But I'm sure that his main concern is that it's drawn appropriately, and then I'll look at the reference and do everything I can to make sure that the colors are right.
Yeah, I think he's got enough pull that if he didn't like your work, he probably would have been in contact with the editors anyway. So I think that's an indication that he likes what you're doing.
Yeah, I've got the gig, and maybe in the last 11 years, he might have said something if he had anything cross to say about it. So I'll take it as a vote of confidence.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no news is good news.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, Larry sort of famously is one of the remaining writers who sort of writes Marvel method and sort of with a slightly reduced script, which I'm guessing the script must, it drops on your desk along with the finished art, so you can see it. Is there how much is there to go on the script for you to kind of inform your decisions? Have you important things like, is it set at night or day? Those kind of
things. How
much
blood? Yeah.
Right.
How much blood?
Nothing that detailed. I think when it's crucial, Larry will indicate whether it's a day scene or a night scene. He is definitely gives the artist room to tell the story. He will be, if there's an aspect or an element of the page or a piece of equipment that is prominent later in the story, he'll make sure the artist knows, draw this in, make sure that the reader can see it, because we're going to see it again later in the book. And that's how he thinks about storytelling and his mastery of it. And he knows how to think, half a book down the chessboard, so to speak, to know that the machine gun can't appear out of nowhere. It appeared somewhere on page 2. But there's plenty in the script for me to know what's happening in the story. But it's more or less for me to understand, okay, if we're working with, especially if we're working with settings that have appeared in other books, even going back to the 80s, making sure the pit looks a certain way. And I've tried to keep that consistent with the way I've done the color designs on the pit since the Chenin Gallant days. So I will try to make some of the settings that we see, Fort Wadsworth, Dr. Mindbender's lab, I'll try to make them look consistent over the issues.
Yeah.
But there's no specific given as this room should look warm or this room should look cold.
Yeah.
Like
Speaking of Dr. Mindbender, we've got a break-in communique coming in now, because it's time for It's a G.I. Joe pop quiz. It's a G.I. Joe pop quiz. Question 1. You take your kid down to the local shopping mall for some Christmas shopping because the big day is coming here soon. You see Santa Claus, but he looks a bit funny. He's got a bald head, a monocle, a tash, open chest, and a codpiece. This looks like Dr. Mindbender posing as Santa Claus. What do you think the kind of gift he's going to give out to the children?
Is that for me?
That is for you, yeah. I sprung that on you with no prior warning, and you're like, what is going on here? What have I stumbled into? That is a question for you, Mr. Brown.
Dr. Mindbender would give you a free experience in this fantastic, incredibly comfortable mind scanner throne to sit on. And if you sat there, you would have a special conduit to speak directly to the elves. And he would lure you to sit in that chair. And then before you got entirely comfortable, he would lower the hammer on you, bind you with manacles, and suck your brains dry. That's what a Dr. Mindbender would do.
Don't take your kid down to that Santa Claus for sure.
No, don't
hold on, Larry. You've got some competition here. Let's see that story.
Yeah, I want to see that story for real. Yeah, definitely. Right, back to the regular schedule. I don't know where we were now.
No, oh yeah, in the scripting, is it? Is it right that a lot of there's tends to be like 2 passes, so that when you see the script, it's slightly higher level description, and then like the dialogue and things get filled in after the event, after you've done the art. So you're getting to see half of the story once you've actually completed the your work on the book.
Yeah, I mean the dialogue is what appears once you see the proof that sends the proof goes out to all members of the team to review and check over before it goes to the printer. So I'll read Larry's dialogue and read specifics of what people are saying to each other, probably for the first time. Sometimes there's dialogue, or what people are saying to each other in Larry's script, but we'll read the final dialogue just before the book goes to the printer.
And has there been instances where you're like, oh, okay, that's what's happening with the story? I didn't realize that.
When you're working on a 20-page book over weeks, sometimes you're working with pages out of order. Yeah, you do sit there and read and say, oh, this is what's happening after all. You have a sense of what's going to be happening in the book, but how it all reads is where Mr. Hama really pulls it together and makes it enjoyable for the reader as well. So, but yeah, I'll enjoy getting my comp copies from IDW and sitting there and actually sitting down like a fan, like a reader, and reading the book, with having it in my hands.
Interesting. And do you ever sort of editorialize in your own head and think, wonder how this idea might progress, or have your own ideas about what you think should be happening next in the story?
That is above my pay grade. I'm just glad to be a part of the team, and the book is in very capable hands in terms of direction. I'm just happy sometimes if I catch something wrong. In terms of something's miscolored or a piece of artwork isn't there. A big I'll let you know an inside secret. One of the sticklers for authenticity, or one of the things that will trip up an artist often, is when you're throwing a grenade, having the spoon fly off of the grenade. That's been a biggie for multiple artists over time. Anybody who's seen a military movie knows you pull the pin, you throw the grenade, the handle flies off the grenade, and then it goes in flight. But we've seen many a grenade with the handle still attached. That a couple of times I've had to catch that.
Okay, cool.
I've got a really random question. I'm just going to slip in here. Have you developed any lockdown hobbies over the last kind of 6 to 8 months? Anything that you weren't doing before that now you've developed?
No, I can't say. Perhaps I make a greater effort to get out and move and exercise and get out of the house. But I'm one of the people that has been less affected by the change in life, being locked down or sent home. I'm fortunate that I get to work from my home studio and have my work sent to me by email, or being able to access it by server, and to be able to send my work in remotely. So it's fortunate that I've been able to work. IDW did have a 3-month or so pause in the spring, which all companies had to end up going that way. But no, I've been fortunate that I haven't had to come up with ways to keep myself busy, because I've always had Joe. Let's put it that way.
So, well, continuing on that vein, will you continue to do Joe until they say no more, do you think?
I'm going to stay as long as they have me.
Good.
I never take it for granted how long I call it my 11-year freelance job, because there's no contract, and it's I work at the pleasure of IDW editorial, and I love it, and it's in this business, and just in this working world, having a steady gig is something to be treasured, and I do. And plus, it's a book that matters, that means something, that's got a history, that's got a fan base, and has got an incredible legacy.
Yeah.
And did you have any idea when you were first offered that 155.5 issue that the gig would last any longer than just that first issue?
Not a clue. I mean, I still, with every new story arc that starts, I'm never quite sure whether I'm going to be involved in it or not. Just because sometimes when you've got different creative teams, sometimes there's another colorist that will be part of that team. You never know for sure. And I can I can only think that just my track record and that an editor never has to doubt whether I'm going to show up on time and deliver the book on time. I think that helps quite a bit.
It's interesting in our read along that we noted that you weren't on the I think it's called Dawn of the Arashikage arc, the Nitho Diaz's initial 5-parter.
Yeah, 246 to 250.
And then you joined back again immediately after that. Was that a case where when Nitho had a colorist that he was experienced with using?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that for sure. I know also at that same time I was moved to the G.I. Joe $6 Million Man.
Oh
crossover.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So because I had experience with Shannon Gallant, I think they just, knowing that there were going to be 2 G.I. Joe related projects, I think they kept me with Shannon and took the opportunity while working with Nitho, who made a fantastic debut with that arc and has made his mark on the G.I. Joe series, especially with Dawn. But I think, I'm not sure whether Nitho requested that colorist or, I mean, IDW, Tom Waltz, my editor at G.I. Joe, whether you always want to make sure you've got enough talent on hand to, step in when you need them. And whether maybe there was a colorist that he wanted to try out at the time. But no, I didn't participate in that, but joined back in after that story arc was over.
And is part of that in terms of just how much you can physically achieve in a single month?
Well, I mean, there is that. I mean, you've got 20 pages of art, and you've seen what Shannon Gallant's artwork looks like. He does not skimp on the detail, and you can't skimp on the coloring because you don't want to give it short shrift. So it takes a good amount of time to work on a Shannon page. But there was a time when I think G.I. Joe for a while they did 2 issues per month, and I got through those. And so,
wow.
Sometimes when you have a deadline, when you have a schedule, you just find a way to say yes and get it done. And that means you give up a little bit of your life in the evenings or the weekends or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there are limitations to how many pages you could do, but that's the game colorists play. How much can I get done before I fall over face down on the computer?
And then if, this 11-year gig on Joe is obviously close to your heart, but do you follow other artists or characters? Is there another dream job that you would like to, a character you'd really like to have a go at, or an artist you'd really like to color over?
My favorite hero of all time is Batman. Like so many, it's just an amazing character that can be, you could go in so many directions with. So that character I've never worked on in terms of a published work. I had the opportunity to color Superman when I worked for Milestone, but I never got my hands on Batman. That would be fun to just do a pinup or a cover or some type of work for DC on the Batman character. The artist, boy oh boy! I mean, there's just so many talented artists out there. It's hard to pick one. I have to say I'm drawing a blank in terms of the artist I would want to work on, but the character is a no-brainer. Batman is.
Yeah, okay. DC, I know you're listening to this podcast, so make the call.
Well, they got plenty of good people to choose from. So, but yeah, Batman's a favorite.
Okay. Are you a football fan? Obviously, Jim Brown being one of the greatest.
I am a football fan.
Okay.
The real football, not your football.
No. So I guess you're a Patriots fan then.
I am a New England Patriots fan. It's tough times these days. But I always said, well, now I have 2 teams to root for. I can root for Tom Brady and root for the Pats.
And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, yeah.
And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, yeah.
That's right.
Well, I'm a Dolphins fan, so
are you really?
Yeah, we're doing okay this season. So
they've kicked our butts a few times unexpectedly.
Yeah, well, Cam Newton, I don't think that was a Bill Belichick's always going to get the best out of any quarterback, but even Cam Newton, I think he's struggling to get something good out. He can't throw it anymore.
I know, but the phrase I end up saying all the time is Cam can't.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to watch. But listen, I was spoiled by a dynasty for many years, and I I didn't grow up a football fan. I came to it later in life. We moved into a neighborhood with lots of sports fans. My dad was not a sports fan. A little bit of basketball, a little bit of Boston Celtics, but not a football or baseball fan. So I didn't really grow up being a sports fan. But I came to appreciate football later in life, and now it's a fun diversion.
Well, especially in Boston, when you have got, like you say, the Celtics, the Bruins, the Red Sox, the Patriots.
Right.
I've been to Gillette Stadium to watch a Patriots game actually, maybe 10 years ago. So I've got a bit
Amazing
of a soft
place.
spot for Boston as a what a lovely. I've been there as well, but hung around for a week in Boston. What a lovely place. Actually, that does bring me on to another question. When Boston has that thick Boston accent, is very very unique. And one of the questions I had is when I hear like the kind of the Dick Van Dyke London Cockney accent in movies that makes me cringe. Do you ever hear Boston accents in TV shows and movies that make you think, no, that's not right?
Oh, I do. And the worst is when people try to do it badly. You'd rather they didn't do it at all.
Okay.
I mean, there are examples where it's done really well, like movies, Martin Scorsese's The Departed. They got it right there. They knew how to say Departed. But actually, Seth Meyers did a fantastic, funny clip on his show called a parody of a movie trailer called Boston Accent.
Okay.
And if you look it up, it is a riot. Just how they make fun of people's efforts to try to sound legitimate. And it's usually you drop your R's and you use a lot of profanity, and that's the way people try to emulate a Boston accent. But yeah, I'm sure when you hear a bad Cockney, it grates on you, and when I hear a bad park the car. You know you're in for a rough time.
I suppose every region has got its own dialect, and probably everyone has that where they've spotted someone or they've heard someone trying to imitate them that's not quite on the money. So yeah, there you go. Good stuff. I had a question actually. Before this lockdown, this COVID-19 lockdown, were you a attendee of comic conventions? Was that something that was in your sphere, or was that something you didn't really do?
I've done a lot of shows in my life. I've tended to pull back on going to shows in recent years just because I didn't find I was getting as much out of them in terms of getting work. I wasn't finding the work there. It was more difficult to sort of like get with an editor and show an editor your work. And I mean, it coincided with the web and being able to email PDFs and portfolios. So between just I'm not too big on crowds anymore. And I think the last Javits Center I went to was just such a crush of humanity. And the time and expense of getting back and forth to a show, it just became more than the cost benefit just didn't work out. So I would go to a show primarily to try to make contact with editors and drum up work. It was nice to see some of the comic book professionals I knew to see them there, but it just didn't work as well in terms of having it be worth the time and the expense.
Yeah, I mean, in the UK has kind of had a resurgence over the last 10 years of conventions. And like you say, that the majority are obviously writers and artists, and you see the odd colorist here and there, but like you say, it seems to be geared towards either artists who are doing commissions or selling artwork, or writers who are prolifically signing books and things like that. So it must be difficult for the letterers and the artist and the colorists, because there's so much emphasis put on the writers and the artist inkers that it feels like you guys who are integral to the book's look and the atmosphere and the way it is interpreted. But I don't want to say you get a short shrift or something like that, but it does feel a bit underlooked, maybe.
A little unsung.
No, I'd say that's always been the case, but I'd also say even less so these days. I think colorists are more appreciated now, and letters are much more appreciated. I would work with a lot of independent publishers, and one of the things that I would say is do not cheap out on your lettering. A bad lettering job will make a book look so unprofessional, even in subtle, indistinguishable ways. Similar to bad coloring, but I think letters are given more their due these days, as well as colorists. And I think with crowdfunding books, I think since a lot of these books are a bit more crafted, there are fewer of them, they take longer to produce. I think people appreciate the quality of the coloring. When you look at an image online and you're deciding whether to pony up your money for a Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaign, you are analyzing and assessing all levels of quality, from the drawing to the coloring to the inking and the lettering. So yeah, I think people have more discerning taste now.
Yeah, well, it even stems up to the big boys as well, because I remember reading recently that book from DC. What's that one? The Batman Who Laughs, from Scott Snyder wrote it. I forget who drew it. I don't think it was Jock. Was it?
Jock.
Can't remember. But anyway, the point was the letterist had decided to use red font for the lead character, and it was almost unreadable because it had just washed itself out and blended into the thought bubble, to the speech bubble, and it was such a terrible choice. And whoever it was, that was a good job on the actual font and the lettering, but the choice of color on the font was just not the greatest. And so that goes to show that through every level of production of that page of comic art, everyone has a distinct role, and if anyone gets their role slightly wrong, it affects the overall product.
Sure, that's why everybody needs an editor. That's why a good editor really is the backstop to any production. They have to look at that, and they have to catch things like that and say, and come back to an artist and say, I see what you're trying to do here, but we have a technical issue about red or whatever it is. So it's commercial art. Ultimately, it's got to work on the page. It's got to be something that can be printed well, and someone's going to want to buy.
I mean, color can be tricky as well, because what you see on the screen isn't necessarily what you see in the physical form once it's been printed out, right?
Definitely in terms of color, and that's one of the biggest things that a colorist has to keep in mind, because they're working in the in the computer screen, in the computer realm. You're dealing with RGB, the colors that go into a picture image. Well, in comics, in printed comics, you're printing in 4 colors: blue, magenta, yellow, and black. CMYK. The C stands, cyan. K stands for black. And those colors are mixed together to create the colors that are printed on the page. And you have to be able to understand or try to anticipate how the coloring that you're seeing on your screen will translate to a printed page of ink on paper, absorbing into paper. And I see plenty of people out there who do fantastic, beautiful things that look great on a computer screen. And that, when that gets printed, it could look like a muddy mess. But with everybody reading, so many people reading books online, there's also a freedom there, because you can have these gorgeous purple and green can be very difficult to translate from the computer screen to paper. But boy, oh boy, on the computer screen itself, if you're just reading a PDF of a book, the fun you could have.
I wondered, we were talking about how much you could fit in a month, and the fact that you're working on some of the double shipping months of G.I. Joe. And I know that often the people at the end of the pipeline of making the book are the colorist and the letter, and sometimes they're, as a result, working with the toughest deadlines. How's that experience been for you? And have you got any stories about working under a little bit more pressure than normal, about how fast you have to turn around the book before it's finalized?
Every artist on a book has got their version of their nightmare story, of a nightmare deadline. Some companies are better than others in terms of really managing the deadlines and making sure people deliver on a schedule. What I'll say is, sometimes it just goes that way, and you have to pull late nights or weekends or all nighters or whatever. Haven't had to go quite that length with GI Joe, and I will say of all the companies I've worked for in terms of monthly production of books, IDW has such respect for the artist and giving the artist time to work. They never you never throw in a book at the last minute and expect to just get it done. There's always my editor Tom Waltz for GI Joe, even when you do have those unfortunate situations, it's always apologetic. It's never assuming that you'll do it because you want the job, right? So every artist will have their sort of situation where, oh my God, I have to get this done fast. But when you have the advantage of being able to do it full time rather than a part-time job, it's my day gig, and I color my books from day to evening, and you get an idea of how many pages you have to get done, and you just work backwards. You say, these are the pages I have to get done, make my goals for the day, make my goals for the week, and the deadline waits for no one, and that editor needs to get the book out to the printer. And especially with something like GI Joe, you need to the book needs to be sent to Hasbro for review to make sure that meets their standards too. So it's not as simple as get it done and sent to the printer. Hasbro needs to review it as well.
Yeah, there's a couple of masters in play there. Got to please them all. Quick random question. What are your top 3 favorite movies?
Oh, The Godfather, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Heat. Heat,
okay.
Al Pacino, Michael Mann film, and I just thought of movies that will stop me dead. Remember, looking around, Goodfellas. That's another one. I'm half Italian, so I have a
you got a vested interest there. Yeah,
a vested interest in the mob movie. But I think those are some of the top ones that people will still come back to.
Yeah, timeless, isn't he? Yeah.
on that subject as well, when I've spoken to colorists before, and even maybe sort of the inkers, that they say that when they're in the zone, it's almost like a kind of a meditative process.
True,
and
true.
you can kind of almost doing it to a degree, and kind of using just a part of your brain and focusing something else at the same time. So often the creators I've spoken to, when they're maybe doing the coloring or doing the inking stage of the process, they might be listening to maybe an audiobook or having a film on in the background, and being able to kind of enjoy that with the other part of their brain as they're working. Is that something you do?
Yeah, I'm not a real music guy, but I will listen to a lot of talk radio and a lot of books on tape, or a lot of podcasts for comedy, that type of thing. I'm more of a spoken word person as opposed to music. But years ago, I had a TV video set up in my office. It just didn't quite last. I never did as much about putting on a film or a TV show in the background. I tend to just like to have the part of my brain that could listen to the audio, listen to the talk. That diverted me enough, but looking over to see the screen, I know a lot of artists do it. They're inspired by, I'm inspired by lighting in movies constantly. I just don't usually watch it while I'm working.
Yeah, too distracting. I think I'd be the same.
For me, yeah.
Whoa, it's about that time. It's a G.I. Joe pop quiz. It's a G.I. Joe pop quiz. Question 2. The G.I. Joes are in a bit of a fix. They need to ramp up their skills. They need to add someone into the mix to help them fight Cobra. They want someone who's kind of a bit metal, a bit droid-like, a bit of a robot. Who do they give the call? Do they call R2-D2, Robocop, T-Bob, Wally, or Robbie the Robot?
Well, you got to go with the firepower. You got to go with RoboCop. That's not even a question.
Yeah, RoboCop against some of them BATs. I'd like to see that.
Wally is kind of cute, though. I have to.
I don't know what Wally's going to add to the mix, though, apart from kind of just cutifying it up.
And it's got to be the Peter Weller RoboCop. None of those other guys.
Yeah. That was,
for sure.
I think I've given you a option to then give me a option to rewatch that movie, because I'm always looking for movies to watch. I've got a calendar target of 200 movies to watch this year.
Oh,
And
you got to do a double feature. You got to do Starship Troopers and RoboCop.
I've done Starship Troopers already this year, and I don't count rewatches as well. So I think I've got
okay.
I think I've got 15 days to watch 15 movies. I'm on 185, so the pressure's on. So RoboCop, but I think you've inspired me, and I've inspired me as well to watch RoboCop tomorrow. So that's going to be my movie for the. Yeah. I actually
Is it
haven't
part
watched.
Of your collection? Or do you have to hunt it down, or do you have it in your collection?
That's a good question. I think I've got it on DVD, but if I don't, I'll have to rent it and stream it. But I haven't actually. I don't think I've watched either RoboCop 2 or 3. But I know Frank Miller wrote 3. Did he?
Was it
two? Was it
2? I think he might be involved in both potentially. Okay. But yeah,
I don't know if I don't think they're any good though, are they?
Yeah, it's wrote in inverted commas because it was sort of, I think, taken away so far from his original vision.
I remember 3 as a rough ride.
I'll just do 1 then. Okay.
Yeah, I've kind of written them both out of my memory, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Listen, it has been a wild ride having the Godfather of Colour and Mr. James Brown on the show this week. We want to extend our gratitude and our thanks for getting you on the show. I hope you had fun. I certainly had a blast.
Oh, it's been a great time. And keep on reading. We've got a new Joe in comics, in the IDDO comics. We've got a new G.I. Joe character coming. Her code name remains a mystery. Larry Hama is at it again and creating a new G.I. Joe character, and I think that's
not enough.
Issue number 280 for another 5-issue arc with a great artist named Andrew Griffith.
Oh yeah, from Transformers. Yeah, Robots in Disguise, Andrew Griffith. Oh right, wow.
He's amazing stuff. You could see some of the covers that are coming, and stay tuned.
Yeah. Well, that's great because we've actually covered every single issue of Real American Hero on the Talking Joe podcast. So, and I think we're just which one have we just covered on this week's one, Mark?
We're
up to 258.
What is it? Yeah,
I think we just got to 258. Yeah.
What's it?
Venom
called?
Rising. Yeah, Venom Rising. So we'll be catching up to real time very shortly. But yeah, great. We'll look out for that new arc, Andrew Griffith, new character. Time to get excited for the G.I. Joe Real American Hero. Once again, thanks to Jay Brown for popping onto the show, giving up his time when he should be chained to the desk, colouring those Joe pages.
Thanks again.
Thanks again. We may hit you up in the future for a return to the show.
I'd come back in a New York minute. This has been a really great time. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Fantastic.
Thanks so much.